Hi guys, welcome to Abuse Recovery Success. I'm super excited to share with you a guest that's really strong and kind of a do-it-all woman since she's a mom of 5. Steph, welcome to Abuse Recovery Success.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, April.
Yeah, of course. Steph, I find you fascinating because you're humble, but you've also been through so much. You're doing a lot. And I think for the listeners here at Abuse Recovery Success, my goal is that we all are a bright light, that we shine and spread light wherever we go. And, I feel like just in our couple of minutes of talking so far, I already feel that light coming from you. And I'm excited to hear your journey through the darkness into the light. So really, without further ado, listeners, let's welcome Steph, mother of 5, opioid recovery. Tell us more about you.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, I'm married. I'm a mother of 5. I'm a self-proclaimed soccer mom.
Okay.
I have 3 boys and they all played sports and everything. So, but yeah, I like to always start my story with that because a lot of people think that addicts are living under bridges and stuff, but they're on the PTA committee, they're, coaching kids soccer teams. We're amongst the community with these happy, smiley faces living our lives, and nobody knows what's going on behind the scenes, what we're really suffering through, whether that be abuse, trauma, addiction. And that was the case for me. I lived for very, very many years playing the happy wife and mom. And then behind the scenes, I was struggling with my own demons, which was opioid addiction. So it started in 2008. At that point, I had only had my 3 sons. I was 27, going on 28 years old, and I thought that I was done having kids. I always kind of struggled with insecurity issues and low self-esteem, but for whatever reason, my post-mom body just amplified those insecurities to the extreme. So, it was to the point where I didn't want to be seen naked. It was affecting my marriage and our sex life. And I ended up seeing a plastic surgeon for a consultation about my issues, my insecurities. And he suggested what they called the mommy makeover, which was a tummy tuck and a breast lift. Sounded good to me. I scheduled the appointment, had it done. And that's when the medication started. Okay. So I think that's how a lot of people end up getting hooked on opioids, as it's a sincere need for it in the beginning. And that's what it was like for me. So my doctor prescribed, to manage the post-op pain, morphine and Vicodin, a very strong dose of Vicodin. And the morphine was only for a couple days, but the Vicodin, he kept me on it for a few months. I probably didn't need it for a few months, but for whatever reason, he kept me on it. And I liked the way I felt, so I just kept taking it. It was like just this overwhelming sense of well-being. I was super happy and I was motivated to do everything. And I was super social, which typically wasn't me. I didn't realize I was high. That's what it was. I was super high on these meds, but I liked it, too much.
Yeah.
And once that 3rd month wrapped up and he refused to continue refilling the prescription, I started jumping through hoops, doing crazy things to get my hands on this medication. I had a tooth extracted. I kept complaining that I had like a pain in my tooth that wasn't really there. And I kept going back and back. And finally he was like, you're going to have this extracted. And I thought, okay, if I have surgery again, they're going to give this. And sure enough, and I specifically requested, this dose of pain medication, and they gave it to me. It got to the point though, to where I started researching online. How can I get my hands on this without always having to make up medical reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be a way I can have access to this substance or something similar to it, something that could give me the same effects. And I came across a medication, and this is, remember, back in 2008 or 2009, and I came across a medication called tramadol, which at the time was not considered a controlled substance. So I was able to easily have it shipped to my house from a pharmacy outside the country. And I had access to that for very many years. And that high, the tramadol high was just as powerful, if not more than the Vicodin. And the withdrawals were a lot worse than what I had experienced from Vicodin. I don't know. Have you ever heard of tramadol
I
or
no.
Ultram?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
My
So
producer has.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my drug of choice for years after that, until people started figuring out that it actually was highly addictive, and they moved it to a narcotic controlled substance
Mm.
in its classification. So after that, that was in like 2014, I think, when they changed it over. But I was still able to get it until for another 5 years. I want to say it was like in 2019 when they finally started seizing my packages. And between the time that I was started taking tramadol and the time that they started seizing my packages, there were periods where I wouldn't get my shipment. It would get lost, or I just didn't have the money to pay for it, because of course they're charging you a crap ton of money to pay for it. And I knew when my prescription was running low, the hell that I was about to experience. And I just dreaded it. And sure, I'd go through these phases of withdrawals every now and then. And I would lie to my husband, because I kept this a secret from everybody. My parents, my friends, my family, nobody knew that I was addicted to pain medication. And when I would go through my withdrawals, I would tell everybody I was sick. I was like, oh, I have the flu. And they believed me, because it was very much flu-like looking from the outside in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was just shaking and sick and just wanting to crawl out of my own skin. But yeah, so going back to when they began seizing my packages at the US Customs, I didn't know what I was going to do. When I took that last pill, I was living so much fear, and I had been a slave to this for so many years,
Yeah.
since 2008. And finally, at that point, is when I said, I have no other choice but to seek help. And so towards the end of 2019 is when I sought help. And it was just when the pandemic had started. So hospitals were filling up, doctors' offices were filling up, and the ideas of having virtual medical appointments was becoming acceptable. So during doing my research, I came across a virtual outpatient treatment program. I never hear anybody talking about this, so I'm hoping that this helps somebody.
Sure, yeah.
But it was an outpatient virtual treatment program through an app called Work It. I don't think Work It's the only one that's out there like it. That just happens to be the one that I chose. Everything was done through my phone. I scheduled my appointment through my phone. I answered it. They emailed me a questionnaire, and I had my consultation, just like how you and I are discussing the situation. That's how my consultation went with the doctor. And she's asking me what I had been taking, for how long, how much. And she's looking at me, and she realizes I'm just sweating bullets and I'm kind of jittery. And she says, "You're probably on day 3 right now, aren't you? Day 3 or day 4?" And I was like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" She recognized the signs. So she prescribes a medication called Suboxone. And I had heard of it, and it's highly controversial. So I didn't know if that was the route I wanted to go, But I think my desperation for wanting to escape my withdrawals was a lot stronger than my concerns for the Suboxone, the side effects. So I agreed to take it. They wrote a prescription. I picked it up. I was 1 tablet under the tongue once a day, lasted all day. And I was scared to death that I might end up trading one addiction for another. And at this point, I'm thinking, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to get clean, I'm going to get clean. I'm not going to trade one addiction for another. So I told myself, I'm going to take the least amount that I could possibly get away with that keeps my withdrawals at bay. So she told me that I could take up to 2 a day if I needed to, but I was okay with 1. I did that for a week. The second week, I thought, well, okay, I feel great. I felt like I was detoxing without the withdrawal syndrome. So I thought the second week, I'm going to try 3/4 of a tab. I was okay. The second week, half a tab. The third week, a quarter. And the 5th week, and I did that all the way down to 1/8 of a tab. It took me about 5 weeks, and I was completely fine. I didn't have withdrawals from the Suboxone. At that point, I experienced what they call the pink cloud, where I thought, oh, I'm free. Like, I was so happy. Like, I'm free from addiction. I no longer need these medications. Like, oh, I was in the best state of mind until the pink cloud started fading and then pause kicked in. And I didn't know what that was. That was the one thing that I wish that the doctor would have told me during the program. I wish she would have prepared me for that. But I learned it on my own. I started experiencing pause, which is post-acute withdrawal syndrome. Horrible, horrible depression. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to get off the couch. I didn't see a reason for going on. I mean, but I have this family to live for, so suicidal thoughts never crossed my mind. But I just didn't see a point in getting out of bed and living a life just to suffer. I had no motivation to do anything. And then eventually I needed something for like some sort of instant gratification, some sort of pleasure. And I turned to food. And that was my comfort. And then I got addicted to food. And that I let that happen for like a year and a half. And I avoided mirrors. I avoided the scales. And I would wear stretchy clothes every day. So like, I just didn't want to acknowledge the fact that I was putting on a lot of weight in a short period of time. On July 9th of this year, which is very recently, it was just a few months ago, I had to go to the doctor because I felt myself getting really sick, just super weak, lightheaded, dizzy, feverish. I didn't know what was wrong with me. So I go to urgent care and they said, yeah, you have a fever. So they admitted me and they weighed me. And at that point, I was forced to face reality. I stepped on the scales and I weighed more than I ever had in my whole life, even being 9 months pregnant. Wow. Which I weighed in at 195. And that was just, for me, my height, female, my frame, it was way, way too much. So there was that. And then she said, yeah, you have a fever. They took some blood and they realized that I had really high inflammation in my body. We didn't know what was causing it, where it was coming from. And then also my white blood cell count was really high. And we didn't know what was causing that either. And to this day, I have no idea what caused that, but it got my butt to the doctor. And so they put me on an IV and gave me some like really strong antibiotics through my IV and some sort of anti-inflammatory, and wrote me a prescription to go to the pharmacy, which was in the same building, to pick up my medication and continue my treatment at home. So I go to the pharmacy and there's a surveillance camera on the counter. And I look up and I didn't even recognize the person. Like the way that I felt. Oh my gosh. I didn't even recognize that woman on the counter or on the camera. I was forced to face reality that day. My only assumption of the reason I got sick, some unexplained sickness, was so that I could stop dead in my tracks where I was at and turn my life around. So I go home and I just cried it out. I bawled it out. I felt sorry for myself for a couple of days, but then I told myself, I didn't want to exchange one addiction for another. And that's exactly what I did, but it was food, and I didn't know what to do. I started researching ways to get through pause. And I knew I couldn't do it on my own. I made an appointment with a psychiatrist and I started therapy. And I forced myself to move my body, even on the days that I didn't feel like it, even on the days that I absolutely didn't want to do anything else but sleep. I forced myself to get up, and I had no endurance in the beginning. So I would just walk around the block, right? Until I built up enough endurance and strength to do it a couple times. And I continued doing that till I could walk a mile and then 2 miles. I promised myself, if you could walk consistently like this or jog, power walk, whatever, for 30 days, reward yourself with a gym membership. So I did. And then I started going to the gym and strength training. I stopped eating processed food. I didn't even do anything that dramatic to my diet. I just said, I'm going to use common sense. Cut out processed foods, eat clean, start when I'm hungry, and stop when I'm satisfied. And those two changes boosted my endorphins, my natural happy chemicals.
Yeah.
I started to feel better. And my third step was, okay, I need to get connected to other people who are like me. So I plugged into communities of like-minded people on like Facebook groups and Instagram. And I started following people like you who were sharing, similar stories. And that sense of belonging that I experienced from being involved in the community, the sober community, that did something for my mental health. So I just, between the three things, forcing myself to move my body, flooding my body with nutrition, and surrounding myself with like-minded people within this community. That's the only reason I'm here today. Happy, experiencing life without addiction.
I have questions, lots. But
Okay.
yeah, food is hard. I think food is hard for a lot of us that go into recovery from substances, and I myself love it. It's hard. And I would say I have a sweet tooth that's really unparalleled. And I've been having my own kind of tumultuous time in business, just a lot of different things going on. And, I actively do therapy. And my therapist, for me, I've struggled more with being ultra restrictive and then almost bingey type, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to not put so much emphasis on it either way. But I find it interesting that all the people that it's very rare I come across someone who's in recovery from substances that hasn't at one point or the other had some kind of struggle with food. So I guess I want to go back into some of your background for sure and some of the initial parts of the story. But since we're on the topic right now, you mentioned kind of cutting the processed foods, eating mindfully when you're full, when you're hungry, stopping, starting. What are some other tips? Let's say we have a listener right now that's listening to this and maybe they're struggling with food and that's always in the thing they're struggling with, or they're in recovery and they're trying to figure out how to balance that. What would be some advice or tidbits you'd give them?
My advice that I've given to friends who are in that situation is not to restrict yourself in extreme measures, because I feel like that's setting yourself up for failure. There's so much controversy about what the natural human diet should be.
Yeah.
The keto people, the vegan people. But I know for a fact, if I were to go on an extreme diet, I would completely end up binging within a matter of time. So I think allowing yourself to eat the foods that you enjoy, but just using common sense, and even if you do have processed foods, just let's say candy or chips, in moderation. So my advice would be not to be extreme with your diet. Just, common sense.
Sure.
And I think most people know what's good for you.
Yeah, we do. Let me ask you this. So this is a long time that you had to deal with the opioid addiction and kind of going through it. And it's so interesting to me, the extreme measures that we go through to get our DOC. But in saying that, what do you think, how do you think you hit it? Because it was a long time. And like you mentioned, you had family that didn't know other people. Were there moments where you feel like now that you talk to your family, that they say, well, we knew something was up? Tell us more about that.
My husband was the only one who said he suggested something was up. My kids, who were teens at the time, and now two of them are adults, they just thought something was mentally, they knew something was wrong, but they thought that I had a chemical imbalance, or they didn't really understand addiction, and even to this day, to be honest with you, I have not really had to sit down talk with them about asking them if I caused any sort of pain on them or how it might have affected them. I need to do that. But yeah, they just thought that I was suffering with some depression or whatever, which I probably was also.
Sure.
But my parents and everybody else, they said I had no idea. So I hid it pretty well. I think a lot of us are able to hide it.
Yeah. And I know you are married. Are you still married?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us, a little bit about the journey of kind of repairing relationships. And I love that you mentioned you haven't had that talk with the kids, and maybe that's something you will do at some point. But with all your relationships, especially the marriage, because I imagine when you took that downward descent off that pink cloud and you were in that not wanting to get out of bed phase, I imagine that took a toll. You also mentioned there was a time with, your body and everything. And so tell us more about all that.
It was tough. We were on the verge. My husband was suffering on the inside for a long time, not wanting to call me out or ask me what was wrong with me because I guess he was afraid of making things worse. But when he finally did, I remember this clearly. He had sent me a text message saying, I'm on my way home. I'm not going to the gym today because you and I need to sit down and have a long talk. There's some things I need to discuss and get off my chest. So he came home and he told me how much it hurt him that I was, I didn't have because I was so depressed and I was going through my funk, my pause. He would be trying to talk to me and I did not even have the energy or the will to listen to him and respond. I was just kind of there, I don't know, like a zombie. So the fact that he didn't have a partner to communicate with, he noticed that I wasn't I was always irresponsive, and wanting to be intimate. I had absolutely no desire to be intimate. I didn't want him to touch me, kiss me, nothing. And that hurt him. So he ended up telling me that he felt unloved. He felt neglected, and he was hurt from all the rejection that he was getting. Every time he went to touch me, that hurt me because I loved him very much, but I was suffering. I was struggling with my own demons, and I did get kind of defensive at first. And I said, you know what? I understand that your needs aren't being met, but you have no idea what I'm going through. And it wasn't until I actually brought my marital stuff up with my therapist that I learned how to handle that situation differently. To look at things from his perspective. And then I ended up apologizing for all the years that it was about, I want to say a couple of years that I experienced pause, almost a couple of years that I was putting him through that, where he was feeling neglected, where I didn't want to even communicate with them. No dinner dates, not even TV conversation, nothing. We were kind of living parallel lives in the same house, but things are better now. We were able to repair all of that. And there was a lot of forgiveness that had to take place, but there was definitely some healing that had to do. And I appreciate him for getting to the point where he sat me down and talked about it. Because I think with some people, they continue to just let it build up and then till they end up growing apart.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that is a lot of growth and communication. For the listeners that are trapped in a shame cycle right now, and since you've been through all the evolution of addiction and where it takes us, what would you tell someone that's currently in that shame cycle?
Shame, that's a huge, huge part of it. I would say, first of all, not to rush and come out and tell your story not until you're ready. I felt a lot of shame for a long time to where I never posted it publicly. I had an Instagram and a Facebook with my private friends, people that I knew from school or that I used to work with, family members. And I ended up, when I first opened up with my story, it was on a separate account that was when I plugged into the community. It took me time to share my story with everyone else that I knew. And then once I did, I felt completely liberated.
Yeah.
I thought that everybody was going to judge me and look down on me. And I had actually had so many people in my inbox telling me how proud they were. I had no idea, but I'm so proud of you where you are today. I had people come to me telling me that they were struggling and that they didn't know how to deal with it and ask questions about the virtual treatment centers. So my advice is when you're when you're going through the feeling of shame, don't feel like you have to tell your story right away. But when you're ready, I think you'll find that you're going to have a lot more support than what you thought was possible or that what you expected.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that you said liberated, because it is such a liberating feeling being open about your journey and your struggles and recovery and all that makes that up. What would you say, because you've been through ups and downs, you've been through pause, you've been through addiction. What would you say your lowest point was? And how would you sum up in a short manner how you kind of climbed out of that for any of those that are feeling at their lowest?
Definitely my lowest point, the turnaround point for me was the day that I had to face reality. The day that I went to the doctor and saw what damage I was causing to my own body. I was in denial for so long, but being forced to face reality was the darkest point, but it was also my turning point. I couldn't hide anymore. I couldn't avoid the scales. I had to stop avoiding the mirrors because now I knew what the truth was. The truth was I was destroying my body. That was the turning point for me. And I think I can't speak for everybody, but I think for a lot of people, you get a slap in the face like that. You get, whether it's the day where your darkest day or your light, whatever you want to call it, I call it like an epiphany, but it's that one day, that one moment that forces you. It's like a slap in the face, and it forces you to make you see what it is that you're really doing, not only to yourself and your own body, but to your family and the people around you. So I would have to say that day that I was forced to go to the doctor and, my blood work came out crazy and my weight and my everything, that was the day. That was my turning point. That was my darkest point.
Got it. Who are you today?
Today, I'm a happy wife and mother and grandmother.
Oh,
I forget to throw that in there sometimes. But yes, I'm still your soccer mom. However, one thing that I've learned is having goals, having something positive to work towards and look forward to every day is super beneficial to mental health. So I'm also, I also wear a lot of different hats. I've got entrepreneurial projects that I work on, YouTubing, because I've gotten into hypnotherapy. So I have my projects. So I feel like I wear many different hats now. And those are things that keep me going and keep me motivated every day.
I love that because now you're living a full life. You're not in the haze of addiction and you're not mired in depression. You're out there living your life. And I love that for you. So tell us, what are 3 of your daily practices that keep you grounded, centered, and in this wonderful space that you're in?
Okay, so number 1 is meditation.
Okay.
Because having faith in a higher power for me, and it doesn't have to be religious, it doesn't have to be God, but having faith that there's a higher power that's always in control, that has your best interests in heart, something that you could surrender your worries to, knowing that everything's going to be okay, that's huge. So meditation, prayer, strengthening my faith, that's 1. Number 2, body movement, moving my body, forcing myself to move my body every single day, even if it's not to go to the gym, just to go walk my dog or walk my daughter in her stroller. And then the 3rd one by far is to have daily goals that you work towards every day. I mentioned that towards the end, but having something that gets you out of bed, gives you something to look forward to and keeps you going.
I love that. I do all of those things too. And I think that they're so important in keeping us grounded. And before we part today, it's been such a pleasure having you as a guest and really getting to know you. And I appreciate you being a listener. What would be the last parting words you'd like to share with somebody who's tuned in today for this episode? And how can they find you if they want to keep up with your journey? Because like I said from the beginning, keeping us close in this community is part of sobriety.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would have to say is if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, subscribe, and to others like it, definitely get yourself involved in the community, because when you realize that you're not going through this alone, there's something that does for your mental health. And when you realize that there are people out there who are praying for you, who are supporting you, who are cheering you on, nothing beats that. So I would say definitely get plugged into the community.
Yeah. And to the listeners, I think Steph really brought up a great point, is that we have these other options. And I love that you really used an online platform to really launch your sobriety, and you did it in the middle of a pandemic, you know? So I'm so impressed by you, and I'm glad that you're here to share today with the listeners this other avenue, because there's so many different ways we can get sober, and all that's important is that we put one foot in front of the other and that we have that desire to do so. And then for those of my listeners that aren't suffering from, you know, recovery or addiction or anything like that, and you're recovering instead from a trauma, or you're just dealing with life, there's online tools for all of that too. Really, now we're in a culture where you can really type anything in and find a source. And I think, Steph, you hit the nail on the head. Like, we have a community for a reason. Access that, utilize that, find your safe place, because sometimes it doesn't start at home. But Steph, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. It was really cool to get to know you, and thank you for sharing everything.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, April.
Of course, I appreciate you. And guys, if you want to catch up on more episodes of Abuse Recovery Success, you can find us at abuserecoverysuccess.com. You can also follow me on TikTok and Instagram at April_the_Hills. And then, of course, you can catch our episodes on YouTube under April Hill. Have a wonderful day and shine bright.